Blog Talk Radio.
Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations team is in charge of the field. Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations team. Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations team.
And welcome to another edition of Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations Radio. And this is our annual Thanksgiving special, as started by the famous Mothman Poirier 1.0.
Oh, yeah, I did.
And Tim's also on the line.
Yep.
And so, Nick, what do you think, Nick? Before we get started with the show, how are you doing today, and what do you think about another exciting Mad Gasser update?
I'm okay, a little tired from work, but otherwise good. Another Mad Gasser show, well, I'm as excited as ever.
Well, I guess we'll just get started then, right, Tim? You have any news or anything you wanted to say?
I don't have anything, really. Other than I seen it said there was a Yahoo News article that said that the Mars rover Curiosity found something amazing, but my video wouldn't load.
Do you want to do any updates on your research on the UFO crash, Jer, or do you want to save it for another day?
Well, yeah, I'll say a little bit. Well, me and Nick just came back from UNLV, which is a college nearby, and we were researching the case for, I don't know, about 4 or 5 hours the other day, and we actually managed to find a few interesting pieces of evidence, along with I got in contact with one of the original investigators. So, exciting things going on. Expect a lot of interesting updates coming up. But, yeah, we'll get started with today's topic. Like I said, it's called the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. I'm just going to give a quick overview of what the Mad Gasser is, and then I guess we'll get involved with some sightings. How's that?
Okay.
All right, well, the Mad Gasser of Mattoon was the name given to the person or people believed to be responsible for a series of apparent gas attacks that occurred in Beaufort County, Virginia, during the early 1930s, and in Mattoon, Illinois, during the mid-1940s. Whether the attacks were anything more than a case of mass hysteria, if the individual reports were connected, and the ultimate explanation for the events still remains debated to this day. So, okay. I guess I'll say a little bit about what the Gasser appeared to look like, and after that, we'll get started with some sightings. Well, contemporary description of the Mad Gasser are based on the testimony of Mr. and Mrs. Bert Kearney of Marshall Avenue, the first victims of the first Mattoon case to be reported to the media. They describe the gasser as being a tall, thin man dressed in dark clothing wearing a tight-fitting cap. Another report says they describe the gasser as being a female dressed as a man. The gasser also had described as carrying a weird type of split gun, which is an agricultural tool for spraying pesticides, which he purportedly used to expel the gas. So, Nick, before we get deep into these sightings, what's your opinion on the Mad Gasser?
I think the Mad Gasser of Mattoon is most likely a person that was just going around and trying to harm people severely or trying to kill them. Basically, I just think that the Mad Gasser is a deranged criminal.
What do you think, Tim?
What the Mad Gasser is?
Yeah.
Well, I know that we've talked about it many times, but who knows? It may be like a serial killer of some sort, like a lot of people say it is.
Mm-hmm.
But, like I said, all the other theories really kind of confuse me, so I don't really know. Like I said, I don't really know exactly what it is, but I'll stick towards the serial killer thing.
So,
or maybe a possible alien.
We'll bring this up in more detail later. Warren Coleman, he wrote a book saying that he thought that the Mad Gasser of Mattoon was actually a form of an alien, or an extraterrestrial. We'll get involved with that a little bit later. Okay, so, like I said earlier, the first Mad Gasser reports came from Boatort County, Virginia. All right, so these attacks in Virginia began on December 22nd, 1933, and ended in 1934, February. So, Nick, just think about this date real quick. How many, you don't really hear serial killers really from the 1930s besides the occasional deranged individual like Albert Fish or H.G. Holmes or one of those people,
Yeah.
This is really out of the ordinary for that time for someone to be trying to gas these houses. Not that it couldn't have happened, but I don't know, I thought it's kind of unusual for that time period.
Well, yeah, the bottom line is, at that time, the people in the country were broke. That was in the middle of the Great Depression, so people weren't really paying attention to serial killers, and also in that time, a lot of the public's attention was focused on gangsters like Al Capone, Bonnie and Clyde, Bugsy Siegel, etc. So the lesser-known killers like Albert Fish and the Mad Gasser went under the radar in news coverage, especially nationally. So I think we have to take those things into consideration.
Oh, definitely. What's that, Tim?
Okay, I think Nick had something to say, didn't you, Nick?
Oh, I just said what I Oh, there.
Well,
that is now probably the 200. Oh, so I think that might have been the 260th time or so I've been interrupted by that noise. It's been an honor.
Well, the first reported gasser incident occurred at the home of Cal Huffman in Haymakertown, Virginia, where three reported attacks happened in the course of one night. At about 10 o'clock p.m. on December 22nd, 1933, Mrs. Huffman reported smelling an unusual odor, and she was overcome by a feeling of nausea. The odor and the nausea returned again about half an hour later, at which time Cal Huffman contacted the police. A third attack occurred around 1 a.m., this time affecting the entire house. In total, 8 members of the Huffman family were affected by this gas, along with Ashby Henderson, a guest staying at the house. Their symptoms included headaches, nausea, facial swelling, and constriction of the mouth and throat. Alice Huffman and daughter Cal Huffman suffered a more severe reaction to the gas, and their throats became so constricted that they stopped breathing and had to be resuscitated. She also suffered a convulsive fit for several weeks after the attack, And through local physician SF Driver recorded at the time, this was the most likely due to anxiety brought on by the attack rather than the effects of the gas itself. So, Tim, judging by this, would you say this was some sort of, like they were attempting to try to kill this individual? Because, I mean, they didn't really say that they seen the gas or they even seen any gas.
I don't know. It goes like the first thing that comes to my mind is like they were trying to kill him, or he was trying to kill him. You know, that's what comes to my mind. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, if someone goes to somebody's house and pumps it up full of a poisonous gas, I don't know what other intent someone would have besides to kill them. Maybe they didn't want to kill them per se. Maybe they just wanted to make them suffer a great deal. Maybe they took gratification from suffering and not killing. That is a possibility, but I really think they just wanted to kill them off.
Well, like I was saying, if you notice, they said the individual came back 3 different times to try to do that to that house. It doesn't really say how big the house is or anything, but I'm assuming it's a somewhat small house. But the other thing I was going to point out is they didn't see the gas or they didn't have any clues as to, obviously some kind of gas was in their house, but yeah, they didn't find the person. Well, the next recorded incident occurred in Cloverdale on December 24th. Claremont Hall, his wife, and their 2 children returned from a church service around 9 a.m. They detected a strong, sweet odor and immediately began to feel weak and nauseated. Police investigating the case discovered that a nail had been removed from a rear window near where the gas appeared to be most concentrated, and presumed that the nail hole was what they used to inject the gas into their house. Okay, so this just got interesting. At 9 a.m. in the morning, this says. That's in the pure daylight. How does someone get away with that?
I don't know.
You have to be very skilled and very quiet to be able to sneak around in the middle of the day to pull off a crime of this nature.
It doesn't really say. It just says they felt weak and nauseated, similar to what the first couple said in the first group. I don't know, Nick, do you know anything about chemicals, Nick? Any kind of chemicals that would have a strong, sweet odor?
Strong, sweet odor. I mean, there's a lot of different chemicals out there, and there's also the possibility that maybe the Mad Gasser added some type of, like an alternative chemical to an existing chemical and created a compound which made that sweet-smelling aroma. So I don't know if I could really narrow it down, but I can't think of any chemicals that would smell good either. Because
even when you think of like Raid or something like that, it has a terrible odor.
Yeah, if you think of Raid, if you mix ammonia and bleach, you get mustard gas, so that smells terrible. If you get, I'm trying to think of some other poisonous. I mean, there's a lot of different. Any gas is poisonous in large quantities. Like if someone were to breathe in too much oxygen, they would die. But there's just a lot of different things out there. I can't think of any that would smell sweet or smell good. That's very odd.
Well, I'm just going to go over this one pretty quick. Well, the third incident, it says that in Haymaker Town, it said that the 2 individuals that were gassed were hearing people talking outside the home, like 2 people, before gas was injected through a broken window. So that almost sounds like like they said, there's more than one individual that was doing this. I guess you could only imagine that there would be some sort of a team for this sort of thing.
Yeah. I was just trying to pull up some information on the gas, but I wasn't able to do it because of some technical difficulties. But hopefully we could find out maybe what that gas could be. So, because I'm curious as to what type of gas that is, because it's very central to the Mad Gasser of Mattoon story.
Well, overall, there's about 10 or 15 of the Virginia attacks. There's about 20 to 30 of the Illinois incidents. And what's strange is if you look at all these attacks, there's not really any sort of similarities in the victims. Like, they're not all famous people or poor people, rich people. There's not really any similarities. So it sounds like it's kind of attacking at random.
Well, that's a very rare killer or a rare criminal, because this is something I've studied in depth a little bit, criminology and how the criminal mind works. It's what I went to school for. But criminals, and a lot of people probably know this already, but when criminals go to do a crime, especially if it's what we call a crime with a victim, they consider, there's victimless crimes and there's crimes with victims. A victimless crime, so-called, is like a drug deal. A crime with a victim is like robbery. So whenever a criminal goes and seeks a victim, they usually are very ritualized, and they usually have a very discernible pattern. That's why a lot of crooks get caught, because the police figure out their pattern, and they use the pattern against the criminal.
Oh, yeah.
But as you said, the Mad Gasser of Mattoon, as far as we know, I mean, if we dug really deep into the details, we might find a pattern. But as of now, there's no reason for us to believe that the Mad Gasser had a discernible pattern at all, which is very strange. And I guess here's one more random little criminology fact I'll throw out there. Most crimes, especially murders, are committed by people in your family. Usually it's an uncle or a cousin or along those lines that hurts you, or if you're married, it's your spouse. That's what most murders are composed of, people in your own family. But when someone goes out and kills at random, that is the most dangerous and also the most rare type of killer.
Well, what's weird is looking at these, some of the victims their houses were attacked like multiple times. Like they didn't like certain people for some reason.
Yeah.
Well, I have a chart of some. Well, I guess I'm going to go over in the next 10 minutes or so some more of the Virginia sightings, and then I'll get to the even stranger Mattoon, Illinois sighting. It says that in 1934 there was a car driving around a neighborhood releasing strange gases in the air, like maybe it was a failed attempt to try to gas the whole neighborhood. And that's one that Brent had found last time he was on the show.
Oh, yeah, I recall that.
Because he made a joke about it. That's why it stands out to me specifically.
Yeah.
So anyways, it says there's 3 houses located within 2 miles of one another. They're all attacked in consecutive order moving south on one specific night. Sounds like the guy actually isn't afraid to get caught, or he's confident he's not going to get caught doing something like that. Here's the most disturbing one to me. There's something called the Pleasantdale Church. This individual placed barricades around the outside of the doors and windows to prevent escape. Even though there was no church that night, it says that the ministers came home and they said that the attack occurred, I guess, while no one was in there, but they were trying to gas people that were in the church. So almost as if the person I'm pretty sure they would have almost certainly gotten caught if there was a church full of people, and then it happened.
Well, here's a weird. I guess there's a weird answer for that question, if whether they would get caught or not. And it's a yes and a no. Yes, there's a lot of people there, but if you're barricaded inside the building, it's very hard to find out and catch the person who barricaded you on the inside. So it's, yeah, that's a very disturbing and I would say an ingenious plot to harm people, because if you go to a place where people are gathered and they're totally unprepared, I mean, if you go to church, temple, or mall, whatever you go to, if you go to a house of worship and you're singing or praying or whatever, you're not thinking that someone's going to harm you. You feel safe in church. Heck, you might even feel safer in church than you do in your own home. So that is the perfect place to attack if you were going to be a killer.
Well, a good example of, think about it, this is, I hate to use this example, but you think of that shooting in Aurora, Colorado, like you were saying, a bunch of people gathered in one area, not thinking something bad was going to happen.
Yeah, that's another place you traditionally feel safe, is the movie theater. There's never... Until now, yeah. There's never been a history of people being attacked in movie theaters. I mean, sure, it's happened off and on, but people really didn't think about it. But now, when this James Holmes guy went nuts and shot all the people up in the movie theater, people have been made aware of that. And the Mad Gasser of Mattoon must have had a very similar mindset to James Holmes's. So it's kind of interesting to see how criminal, especially sick and deranged criminals, work.
Yeah. Well, I have one more story I want to word from the Virginia sightings before I go on to the Mattoon sighting. This is after the gas attack. There was discolored snow was discovered near the victim's house. The snow had a sweet odor. Analysis showed it to contain sulfur, arsenic, and mineral oil. And authorities suspected it might be insecticide residue. Almost if they spilled the gas, they spilled some of the chemicals that they were mixing it outside or something, is the only thing I could think.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, 10 years later in Mattoon, Illinois, this is how many states up, Nick? About 3?
Yeah.
Anyways, this began in late August 1944. Okay, well, I'm going to go over the first few attacks in detail, then I'll go over a few generalized things over a chart. The first of the 1944 incidents occurred at the house on Grant Avenue in Mattoon, Illinois. Urban Rafe was awakened during the early hours of the morning by a strange odor. He felt nauseated and weak and suffered from a fit of vomiting. Suspecting that he was suffering from domestic gas poisoning, his wife tried to check the kitchen stove to see if there was a problem with the pilot light, but found that she was partially paralyzed herself and couldn't leave the bed. Later that night, a similar incident was also reported by a young mother living close by. She was awakened by the sound of her daughter coughing, but found herself paralyzed and unable to leave her bed. Okay, that's the first night. So there's strange paralyzed individuals. I don't think they reported paralyzed in the original reports, did they, Nick?
No, I do not believe that any were reported.
All right, well, so anyways, this is the next day. There was a third reported incident. This is by a lady named Mrs. Kearney. She smelled a strong, sweet odor, just like the others, at, it says 11 o'clock. But she first dismissed the smell, believing it to be the flowers outside the window. But the odor soon became stronger as she began to lose the feeling in her legs. Mrs. Kearney panicked, and the calls attracted her sister, Mrs. Reddy, who was in the house at the time. Sorry, I was looking for a look at something. Anyways, so Mrs. Reddy also noticed a sweet odor and determined that it was coming from the direction of the bedroom window, which was open at the time. Police were contacted, but no evidence of the prowler was found. But Mrs. Kearney's husband returned from work and found an unidentified man hiding close to one of the house's windows. The man fled, but he was unable to catch him. They described the prowler as a tall man dressed in dark clothing wearing a tight-fitting cap. The description was reported in the local media and became common description of the Gasser throughout the Mattoon incidents thereafter. After the attack, the Kearneys reported suffering from a burning sensation on her lips and throat that they thought came from the gas. Oh man, that was a mouthful. But anyway, so judging from that, what do you think, Nick?
Well, I'd like to probably bring up an alternative theory as to what the Mad Gasser is really quick, because I do find it quite odd that the Mad Gasser was never caught, and that the Mad Gasser was able to pull off these crimes, sometimes even in the middle of the day, where people were, a person drove a car through a residential neighborhood and didn't get caught. So this person is either, like I said, really good, or maybe it's not a person at all. Maybe the Mad Gasser could have some extraterrestrial origins. I think that would be the most logical explanation besides the killer criminal theory as to what the Mad Gasser is. But I say that it could be an alien because the criminal was never caught. The Mad Gasser rather, was very slick and slippery and was not caught by the authorities or by any. Think about it. At the height of the hysteria, you probably had people looking out their windows and watching every little movement that went on in the neighborhood. You read stories about what happened in California and Los Angeles in the 1990s with Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. He had entire neighborhoods fearing him and looking out for him. And that's eventually how he got caught, because some vigilante people found him and nearly beat him to death. So I think it would also be logical to think that when the Mad Gasser was attacking people in Mattoon and various other neighborhoods, that these neighborhoods would be on edge, and that perhaps some vigilantes or a neighborhood watch group or something like that would have caught this guy or this girl or group of people, we don't know. So maybe the Mad Gasser is an extraterrestrial that had some extra earthly, I guess, some. Well,
they also described his outfit that I just told you also, is what Lauren Coleman was saying.
Yeah, it's a very odd outfit for someone to wear, even a deranged killer to wear a long cape and a tight cap. And the descriptions of the Mad Gasser have somewhat of a gas mask or something. Is that right?
Yeah, they said it was a tight-fitting cap. It could have been a gas mask.
Okay, it doesn't say a gas mask outright, but a long cape with a tight cap. That sounds very similar.
Superman or Spawn or something.
Yeah, it sounds like either someone's trying to do a bad impersonation of a superhero, or they're wearing a chemical suit of some sort. Mm-hmm. So this is very odd, and like I said, it could be extraterrestrial in origin. And also, I don't know if we've discussed this before, but perhaps the Mad Gasser was simply a government operative or a government operation And the government could have been running tests as to see how people would react with a certain type of gas, or what they would do if they were attacked by, because this was before World War II, but bottom line is the government could have just been experimenting to see how people would react with a situation like the one we find with the Mad Gasser. So that's also a possibility. And I wouldn't put that past the government to do something like that today, or definitely back then when they could get away with more, because we didn't have the media and whatnot. We didn't have the internet and different other ways of keeping the government in check like we do now.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have some interesting couple of things before we end the show in a few minutes, about 15 minutes. Okay, well, in one attack, here's the first physical evidence they found. On September 5th, 1944, I think this is, it says 2 residents returned home around 10 o'clock at night. After spending a few minutes in the house, they noticed a piece of white cloth next to a skeleton key. And the cloth was slightly larger than a man's handkerchief sitting on the porch next to the screen door. The wife picked up the cloth and smelled it. As soon as she inhaled, she became violently ill. She described the effect as being similar to an electric shock. Her face began to swell, and she experienced a burning sensation in her mouth, throat, and began to vomit. As with the other victim, she also reported feeling weak and experiencing paralysis in her legs. She later hypothesized that the cloth had been left on the porch in order to knock out the family dog, they thought, which usually slept there. That's a prowler to gain access to their house is what she thought. Or is just a clumsy criminal. I could always think that too.
Yeah. Which might be more like it.
You mean like somebody we know? Well, one person said that they even seen an individual break into their house wearing that costume I was telling you about, pumping gas violently, and I guess they got away.
Wow.
So the person's slowly becoming more and more, what do you call it? The more and more not afraid of the, I don't know how you say, more and more brave. That's what I'm looking for. What do you think, Nick?
I think that the criminal is probably becoming more careless as to what they were doing, and that could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe the biggest reason, though, I think that sticks out to my mind is that the criminal simply had an ego boost, because if all the incidents are connected from the 1930s and 40s, the Mad Gasser got away with a lot of attacks, and with each attack that the Mad Gasser got away with, the Mad Gasser's ego would get bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually, the Mad Gasser probably started to think that they were invincible and that they could just do it out in the middle of, they did do it in the middle of broad daylight. So the Mad Gasser already has demonstrated, early on that they were not afraid and they were bold. They were not afraid of being caught, and they simply just went all out in these attacks. So I just think that it stems from the egotistical nature of this person who did these attacks. Unfortunately, we never caught them, and we were never able to interview them and do any other type of
I'm
work
almost
with
surprised
them.
the Richard Ramirez type thing didn't happen to him. We got beat down trying to do this.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, a couple minutes ago, that you would think that in these towns or small cities that people would be on the lookout for the Mad Gasser, and if they saw the Mad Gasser, they would get as many people as they could and chase it down with pitchforks and torches, to use an old expression. But it's just amazing that the Mad Gasser got away with what they did.
I have a newspaper article that says the FBI became involved with the local police, and they issued a statement calling for residents to avoid lingering in residential areas. And they were warning that groups were set up to patrol neighborhoods for public safety. It says citizens were also warned that the individuals were carrying firearms and could discharge if a gas attack was occurred. And during this period, there was also an increase in physical evidence of attacks being reported. People said that there was footprints being discovered underneath windows and tears being found in window screens, almost as if the gasser was almost caught by these mobs walking around, or just mass hysteria of people thinking they were getting attacked. It says that local police received so many false alarms that they reduced the priority of Mad Gasser reports, and they announced this to the public. But it says that after this, there was only one specific incident that was reported mainstream after they said this. One lady says that her name's Bertha Birch. She claimed that she'd seen the gasser, who was a woman dressed up as a man, running from the scene. And she says that when the police came out, they found woman's footprints. So basically what happened is after these angry mobs and police and things were patrolling, the gasser couldn't get as many attacks going on from what it sounds. Or they said they reduced the priority of the attacks. The cops just kind of stopped reporting them after a while, which is kind of ridiculous if you ask me, if someone's really pumping gas into people's houses.
And not consider a priority.
Yeah.
But what do you explain about the cross-dresser, Nick? Or do you think it's just trying to get the cops off their trail?
Well, see, that fact is very hard to substantiate, but, let's look at it from just a couple angles quickly. If it is a woman disguised as a man doing these attacks, that is a brilliant way of getting the cops off her trail, because women killers are extremely rare. Women serial killers are, I think, less than 5% of the amount of serial killers that have ever existed. So we're talking about a very, very small number of people here. So and then maybe that's how the Mad Gasser got away with everything that they did. Maybe it was really a woman that dressed like a man to commit the crimes, then, took off the disguise after having committed the crime, and the police could have just been right around her, because especially back then. Now people don't think of a woman as being a criminal, but back then it was even worse. Back then it was almost a blasphemous thing to suggest a woman could be a criminal. So that would be a brilliant way to get away with the crime. Or perhaps, here's another twist, maybe it was a man dressing up as a woman in order to throw the cops off his trail, or maybe the lady who said that just doesn't know what she's talking about. I mean, those are just three of the many other possibilities that exist, but
okay, well,
that definitely would be a great way to escape prosecution.
I have 5 minutes. I want to say two things real quick. Number one, the last thing I wanted to mention was some witnesses said they saw a blue vapor and a motorized buzzing sound they believed to be from whatever was pumping the gas in the house. But anyways, real quickly, I was going to say, what was I going to look at? To this day, they don't know who the attacker was or what their motive was. But the cops, they don't know whether the Virginia attacks were connected to the Illinois attacks either. They don't know if it was a copycat criminal or was this two separate incidences or what. What are your guys' opinions before we end the show in a few minutes?
I mean, I think the killings were linked because this type of killing would be really weird to duplicate. So I think they're linked.
Well, that's what I think too. I think they're linked because, like you said, they're just so similar.
Well, they're exactly 10 years apart too, which is enough time for someone to move around like that.
Yeah. Before we end the show, Jared, did the Mad Gasser ever manage to kill anybody, or did it just make them sick?
It just made people really sick. It almost killed some people.
Oh, okay.
We have about 5 minutes left. I guess it went over that quicker than I thought. But, yeah, so I didn't get to say the full extent of the cases that I was going to, but you guys get the point about what was going on. So the Mad Gasser, what I was going to say was, you think it could be a copycat criminal if it was two different people?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. There's been some strange copycat killers.
What's your guys' final opinion, at least for now, on the Mad Gasser report? Do you think it's an extraterrestrial, a criminal, any other interesting...
I'm still thinking it's probably a criminal, but like Nick said earlier, you never know. It may have been the government testing something, or a government agent of some sort, or maybe, like you said, even an extraterrestrial.
Yes, I believe that the Mad Gasser was a criminal, and was a very good one at that. Probably one of the best criminals of all time, and despite that fact, the Mad Gasser probably hasn't got much recognition beyond our humble radio show here on Blog Talk Radio.
Yeah. Well, there was only one specific book that was dedicated only to the Mad Gasser. He's mentioned in some other books, but only one specific book talks about only that specific incident, those incidences.
Yes, I think it was a killer, but I'm a person who follows this motto in every single part of my life, and that is, I follow where the evidence leads me. So if I discover something in the next year, when we do our next Mad Gasser special around Thanksgiving in 2013, I'll change my mind if there's good reason to. So we just have to...
Those weren't the complete listing. There was more reports I was talking about, of course, but every year I try to get different ones that I haven't mentioned the year before.
So we'll just have to all sit back and try to learn some more over the next year. Because I actually have, over the years, become kind of interested in this case. At first, I thought it was something very silly and obnoxious, but when you think about it, the Mad Gasser is maybe one of the greatest criminal minds of the 20th century.
Actually, you're probably right. Well, my final thought, because we only have a little bit left in the show, I was going to say, I think that, like you said, he is one of the greatest criminals in the last 100 years at least. I'm kind of surprised that they weren't caught with all these angry mobs of people looking for doing that. I do think, like I was telling Nick, the next time we do one of these shows, I'll pull up more reports that I didn't say before. And you're going to want to tune into our next radio show, even though it's not posted at the current time. It's going to be our other tradition. We're going to talk about the incidents of the creature or being known as Spring-Heeled Jack. And again, I'd like to thank Tim and Nick for doing the show with me, and everybody else that listened or helped contribute to the show. And I'll let my co-hosts say their goodbyes, and then we'll see you guys on the next episode.
All right, everybody. Thank you. Have a good night. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.